Hello and welcome back to Quillpig Gaming, and today we're going to be playing through a demo for 49 Keys. So, 49 Keys is a adventure puzzle game published by 2P Games in 2024. I don't know a whole lot about it, but it seemed kind of interesting at the time that I downloaded the demo. Let's get started. Okay, play. To use the stick and not the buttons. Okay, new game. It was the year of our Lord, 1520. A most unusual figure arrived by dusk at the gates of the Dominican convent in Sant Agostino, Padua. His modest carriage was pulled by a black mule. Presenting himself at the convent's gates, he would speak but one word, my name. His strikingly uncommon features suggested he hailed from a distant realm, a mysterious eastern land perhaps. To me, he handed a letter scribed upon parchment before climbing back into his carriage without a word. Then he left, never to return. Upon returning to my chamber, I unfurled the parchment, raising it to the window slits through which faint rays of the setting sun shone. With a sudden surge of emotion, I discovered the missive was penned by none other than Master, aged yet never to be forgotten. None other than Master. When I had not long donned the cassock, I dwelled within the convent of San Domenico, Bologna. Bologna? Bologna? In those days, it was he who stood as my prior. In that sacred abode, he had introduced me to the Holy Scriptures and their study, to the Church's doctors, and to the eminent theologians. However, his thirst for knowledge was so great that it could never be sated by these few pursuits, noble though they were. Thus, taking aside a number of us monks who shared his thirst for learning, he began introducing us to various other disciplines, with great delight, I might add. Astronomy was a particular passion of his, the charting of the stars, their positions and motions, and astrology, which studies their influence upon worldly affairs. We, his disciples, were truly gripped by his lessons. Even today, though many years may have passed, I cherish them so. They live on in my mind, vivid and untouched memories. An immense sorrow engulfed me as I perused this letter. Master informed me that his time on earth was drawing to a close, and so he was preparing to undertake the long journey toward God. Hence, he had decided to leave me with an invaluable work, a form of inheritance, a work that only I could safeguard in his stead. He explained little of this work. Yet this, along with the urgency with which I was summoned to his residence, only served to further fuel my already keen curiosity. I dearly hoped to reach him before his departure from this life, and so departed promptly upon the dawn. I informed the prior, a man with whom I was quite close, and joined a group of timber merchants heading westward the following day. After several days on the road, I purchased an old, sickly mule for a few coins. I then left the merchant caravan to head northwards, toward the mountains and lakes past the Duchy of Milan. One of those lakes was to be the final stop upon my journey. Master had written of reaching a small town upon River Olona, the name of which now escapes me. There, near the collegiate church, I was to find an abbot, who would then lead me to his hermitage by the lakeshore. The holy man there gave me the terrible news, that Master had passed on several weeks earlier. He himself had witnessed the body as it was ferried across the lake for funeral rites and a fitting burial. His words plunged me into a deepest despair. My companion noticed my dejection and tried to comfort me with great compassion. I then asked the holy man if he had been given anything to hand to me. He merely explained with a shake of the head that a peculiar-looking stranger had only brought him a message with instructions to receive me at the collegiate church. The monastery where he served as abbot belonged to Master's family, and there he had lived in solitude. Only a few servants kept him company in a palace out upon one of the lake's islands. The servants had left the palace over the last few days, hence I would receive no welcome. However, he explained, its gates would be left open to allow me access to the interior. I spent the night in the cell of a monastery, perched high atop rocky cliffs, mulling over the years of my youth in the San Domenico convent. Some despised the master for his sharp intellect in those gloomy days, spewing hateful accusations of him working dark magic, of dealing with the wicked. Only his belonging to an influential family in the area had saved him from trial, but he was still forced to leave the order and take refuge in that isolated palace in the middle of the lake. Nevertheless, his closest disciples, with myself among them, were punished accordingly and sent off to different convents beyond the Papal States. I spent much of the following day in the monastery church, praying to the Virgin and the saints for the salvation of my master's soul. As sunset approached, I was joined in my cell by the lay brother who would ferry me to the island. I greeted the abbot with warmth, and he prayed for God to grant me safe passage. We reached our destination after a short journey on a humble boat. I bid the ferryman farewell and promptly set off along a steep path towards the center of the island, eager to reach the palace gates as soon as possible. The palace. A squarish two-story block featured a small tower in the northwest corner. The south-facing brick facade was already in shadow at the twilight hour. The entrance, topped by an arch, was sealed shut with two heavy oak doors. I put faith in the abbot's words that the gate would be open to receive me and pushed upon the solid wood doors. Alas, they didn't budge an inch. Peering through the slit between them, I was surprised to see a thick wooden plank serving as a crude deadbolt lock. Wait, what's inside? Explore the forest and pick up the axe. Okay, what's this? Audio. Okay. Not sure what the rest of these controls do. I presumed that perhaps some servant still resided within, and so tugged at the rope bell pull by the doors. Nobody answered my call. Despite my efforts, the interior remained silent and still. The palace seemed uninhabited. It was clear that I would have to find another way in. Okay, maps. You unlocked a map. Select location to explore it. Zoom with left and right. Okay. I think we are at... Okay, so forest. Hints. If you're having difficulties, click the question top right to receive a hint, insight, or solution itself, revelation if you're still stuck. Right. Okay. I slowly made my way through the trees, feet sinking into the carpet of autumn's dry leaves. Amidst the whispering chorus of the wildlife, I recognized chirrups of timid squirrels and the deep caws of blackbirds hidden up high in the chestnut branches. Familiar sounds evoke memories of my carefree childhood, of the hunting games played with my brothers and cousins under the watchful eyes of our fathers. North or east? North? Having advanced several paces, I found the earth sloping rapidly toward the lake. Its tranquil surface soon appeared from behind the trunks, lit by the glow of the sunset. All of a sudden, the coastline had grown too steep to continue, and so I made a sharp turn east following the shore. Eventually, I reached a vantage point where the foliage thinned, allowing me to peer upon a wider expanse from a distance. In that direction, I spied on how the island's coast formed a small but definite indentation, a small gulf. About halfway into the cove, there stood an entrance to a cave within the rocky walls, partially shielded by sprawling fern leaves. Reaching it could afford me passage to the palace's underground caverns. However, I needed a boat. The rocky wall was far too steep and smooth to permit my descent. To plunge into those deep lake waters was also out of the question, for I know not how to swim. Okay, east. Thus I continued eastward, following the thin shadows of a chestnut and birch trunks that stretched into the waning light. The myriad chestnut shells embedded in the yellowed leaves pricked through my humble footwear. Several strides further, I reached a narrow clearing. There, the mulch of the underbrush finally drew to an end. I found myself surrounded by birch trees growing in an imperfect circle. A glint from one promptly caught my eye. Sunken into its wood sparkled the blade of a modest axe, likely forgotten by a palace servant. I knew it could prove useful, so with a little effort managed to prise it free, firmly gripped the handle, and leveraged it with my foot. Items. Okay, we have an axe. To use it, drag it to the left page, hold A, and then move it. Okay, examine with X. Okay, so if we go to the axe, press X, axe. Sunken into its wood sparkled the blade of a modest axe, likely forgotten by a palace servant. Okay, so now go back to map. Then we go back to the palace? I think that's the palace. The garden extended several yards east, mostly overrun by spidery weeds. However, it still bore traces of ancient delights. A ruler's straight path of white pebbles, flanked at regular intervals by marble cherubs, led first to a small marble fountain and then to a slight chapel enclosed by iron gates. Huh. Okay, so we're looking around here. Okay. Fountain. Magnificent pine cone topped the three-tiered fountain, hewn from marble, clear water sparkling in the midday sun as it flowed its way down. It's poetic. I tried to imagine the joy that such a sight must once have brought. Its melodic whispers drifted through the air, accentuating the chatter of ladies enjoying the summer afternoon. Now its base was thick with the dead leaves of an autumn past, permeated by a murky water rife with disease. Okay, chapel. I observed the interior of the chapel through the iron bars. A fresco of the Virgin and Child lit by flickering candlelight brought solace to my soul, troubled by the news of the Master's death as I trod through that unfamiliar and seemingly abandoned place. Well, if there's candles, it's not abandoned. Suddenly, swift movement caught my eye. A dark spot reflected on the altar's pink marble. I spun around to realize it was not but a humble blackbird digging for worms in the garden soil. Okay, so that's everything here. So if we go... I descended into a small cultivated garden on a terraced section of the land. At the far end, toward the east, were several wooden storage sheds. Further on, a simple stable stood alongside a chicken coop. Okay, storage sheds. In these humble sheds were stored agricultural tools, firewood, and animal feed. A shack alongside them housed an abandoned rowboat in modest condition. Ooh. Okay, stable and chicken coop, but the rowboat, that sounds good. The rotting wooden shack had once served as a basic stable, holding no more than 3 steeds. No trace of the animals remained. A servant must have returned them to the mainland following the master's death. The chicken coop was also bare, but inside it the scent of grain still hung in the air. It became apparent that these dismal spaces held nothing of use for me. Okay, back to the storage sheds. Okay, rowboat. I realized that, rickety as it was, that vessel was my only means to reach the cave. Okay, back to the lake. I heaved the boat with some difficulty back down the path I'd taken, setting it down in the calm lake waters. I was by no means an experienced oarsman, but my youth had sailed short stretches of the rivers by the Grand Family Castle. I took the oars and aimed the bow eastward, intending to cover the least distance possible by following the shoreline. The lake's calm tranquility and the delicate touch of the setting sun eased my troubled mind, if just for a moment. I shifted my gaze westward, watching as the great glowing orb sunk behind silhouettes of the darkened mountain. Then the shimmering of sun upon the lake's all but still surface, a sight that filled me with gratitude. Oh, it's pretty. I felt a part of that magnificent harmony and began to comprehend the stark truth of the philosopher's words, how the celestial word and its utter perfection reflects the true grandeur of God, of his might. Great spheres high above, revolving with divine majesty. I came to understand how that same grandeur permeates our mortal world, in the waters of lakes and seas, and the fires that blaze within the earth's core, and the dark stone of the mountains. Moreover, it lives on in the saps of the plants, in each breath of the animals, and in the most perfect creation in which the entire cosmos is replicated, man himself. I saw how all is one, as within, so without, as above, so below. My pondering drew to a sharp halt with the appearance of the small gulf from before. I turned to the cave mouth and the ferns that reached out across it. From there, a long tunnel carved into the rock face extended toward the center of the island. I set off in my boat, rowing several strokes more as the darkness grew denser and the screeching of bats increased. Cave. Only when the boat abruptly grazed the rocky wall did I realize that I'd reached the end of the tunnel. By then the darkness was so thick that I had to stand, feeling blindly forth as I pulled the boat on ahead. Finding a narrow stone staircase to my left, I abandoned the boat to begin a cautious ascent, endeavoring not to slip upon the damp, mossy steps. I moved slowly into the blanket of utter darkness, with my right arm tracing the wall, and my left reaching out for any obstacles along the way. After a few steps, I brushed against the wooden surface of what seemed like a rough door. I speculated that this may once have served the inhabitants as a secret route out from the island, a means to escape pirates' attacks. The thought gave me confidence that beyond this threshold, there lay the underground palace chambers. This confidence soon gave way to disappointment, however, when I tried to push the door and found it blocked. Okay, items. To open the door, you need to use an item. To do so, drag the item onto the left page. Hold A and then move... Okay, so items. Okay, item. Hold A. And then there. I recalled the axe I had found in the birch grove. Such a door didn't seem sturdy enough to withstand a well-aimed blow or two, and so the axe handle gripped firmly in my hands. I began to strike with all the strength I could muster. With a few swings, the sodden planks had started to give way, and a few forceful kicks granted an opening through the door into the palace interior. Before proceeding, I turned to retrieve the axe, yet its blade was sunken into the door, and my attempts to dislodge it, the handle snapped clean off. Okay. Palace. A faint light dimly illuminated the place. It emanated from a few worn-out candles, leaned up against the base of a column positioned at the room's center. I found myself standing in a cellar, walled by damp brick, its low vaults supported by stout stone columns. Ascending a staircase that led to a small doorway, I advanced into a long rectangular room that had been converted into the palace kitchen. I then ventured down a passageway to the right, entering a square courtyard with rows of columns. Several doors stood within its walls, and it was overshadowed by 2 additional stories, both also with rows of columns. I raised my eyes to the sky. Twilight had arrived. That night, in unfamiliar surroundings, I was to uncover the arcane legacy left to me by my master. Nothing could have prepared me for what I would witness within those walls, things terrible and extraordinary in equal measure. Oh. Okay, and that's the intro. And that's the demo. Interesting. I've never played a text-based adventure before. I wonder if it's good to start with a new one like this, with 49 keys, or to go all the way back and start with an old one so I can appreciate them more. I don't know. What do you think? Leave a comment if you have a particular thought on which one would be better. Anyway, thank you for coming. I hope you've enjoyed this demo playthrough as much as I have. If you have, please like, share, subscribe, and comment, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.